as we get started here, maybe if I could just ask each gentleman to share maybe a little bit about how you got to your current role. Bob, how you got to Pinehurst, and maybe Robbie, how you got to the USGA.
All right, thank you, Jay, and I'll reiterate what Tom Pashley said last night. Thank you, each of you, for being here, too. I was telling Lee Pace earlier, it's the first time I've felt almost normal, like things might be normal again after not having so many guests this summer and not be able to speak and visit with the people. But thank you for being here. I won't take credit for the weather, but I'll certainly enjoy it with you while you're here. I've been here. I first came to work at Pinehurst in 1982. I grew up in West Virginia, and I'd always dreamed of working in North Carolina, and landed in Pinehurst. And as Audrey was referring to earlier, in 1982, Pinehurst was bankrupt, so they were desperate. They would hire anyone if they hired me. But I've really been here to be able to be part of a great experience since 1984. Of the resurgence and what we've been able to do, and I've been part of. I'm very proud of to see where we are today compared to that.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Again, my name's Robbie Zalznick with the United States Golf Association. I've been with the USGA for about 20 plus years now. I grew up in North Carolina, and my first real job out of college was basically here at Pinehurst Resort. 1998, 1999, I was a Pinehurst Resort employee and a lowly kind of intern growing up into the world of U.S. Open golf, and met all the right people at the USGA at that time, and started with the USGA shortly after the 1999 U.S. Open when Payne Stewart won, and it's kind of been history from there. Had a good run at the USGA and hope that continues. It's Jay, first of all, a pleasure to see you again. Jay and I go way back to 2010's U.S. Amateur. Jay has a major role in the design and upbringing of Chambers Bay, which is a wonderful golf course, and had a good fun working with you, Jay, at the US Am then, and followed up by the 15 US Open. And Bob, we go way back, and Bob's a Carolina Golf Hall of Fame member here, so it's an honor to be on stage with you, Bob. And you're older than me, thank goodness, but we go way back, so I'm honored to be here with all of you.
I have more hair than you do.
Robbie, you brought a special gift with us. One lucky recipient is going to receive this special gift tonight. You want to walk us through what we're looking at up on stage here tonight?
Yeah. Well, again, I've gotten to know these two guys for a little bit, and both have worked closely with both on the U.S. Amateur Championship as one of my responsibilities at the USGA, and so I did bring the Havemeyer Trophy with me. This is the trophy that Tyler Strafacci just won at Bandon Dunes a few months ago. Jay, again, we worked on it at Chambers Bay when Peter Uihlein won in 2010, which was an amazing championship and really launched Chambers Bay's rise in the world of golf. And Bob, we've worked on two of these together, 2008 when Danny Lee won, and then last year, 2019, when Andy Ogletree won the U.S. Amateur. And he just completed being low amateur at the Masters this week, and I think he's launched his way to stardom with that. But the U.S. Amateurs really where golf started for the USGA. It was our first championship, and it's really the reason the USGA was founded way back in 1894 to conduct championships. And at that point, amateur golf was really the only game in golf, and the U.S. Amateur was the first national championship in our country. So happy to have brought the Havemeyer Trophy with me.
Well, the reason we're here at Pinehurst and the session tonight, the third session here, is about championship golf at Pinehurst. And so, Bob, I'm wondering if you could maybe walk us through. Pinehurst has such a rich history of championship golf. I'm sure everybody in the room knows about kind of some of the recent history, but maybe you could walk us through a little bit of the history and how it all got started and how we got here.
Sure, thank you. You know, it's interesting. If you go back to 1901 with the North-South Amateur, that's actually the longest running amateur championship uninterrupted by war or anything else in the country. And it was contested in 1901 on course number 1. And the course in those days stretched out to 5,100 yards they played. But as you go on through the history of amateur golf here, it goes hand in hand, hand in glove with Richard Tufts. And the 62 U.S. Amateur was a great championship. So, and Richard Tufts was, he actually penned the Amateur Creed that you can see beside the Payne Stewart Garden, in the Payne Stewart Garden. I think if you also look at the championship, the winners of the championships of the North-South men's and women's in our hallway, I think you'll be quite impressed with Jack Nicklaus and Bill Campbell. I mean, the list goes on of champions in our history that we're very proud of. And then also, beyond the amateur ranks, the 1936 PGA Championship that we talked about earlier this evening was the first championship to be played at Pinehurst on grass greens. They developed grass putting surfaces in 1935 to do that, and it was actually this week, 84 years ago today, this week that they had the championship. In fact, they mentioned it during the Masters broadcast that other than the 1936 PGA Championship, this past week's Masters was the latest major golf championship contested other than the 36 PGA Championship.
Very impressive. When we look at the more recent championship history, I think specifically as it relates to the USGA, we look at the '99 U.S. Open, which Payne Stewart won. We touched on it a little bit earlier in how prior to that, the U.S. Open had not been staged in southern venues or not very often. Robbie, can you maybe walk us through how the '99 Open kind of came about coming to Pinehurst?
Yeah, I can jump in, and Bob will jump in too, because he's.
Yeah, I'll have to jump in.
Yeah, I know you will. He'll correct me. But the 1976 U.S. Open was staged down at Atlanta Athletic Club, and Jerry Pate won hitting a famous 5-iron out of the rough to a tucked hole location on basically a peninsula island part of the 18th green, which is an amazing shot, and amazing that it held. Yeah. So when you think about it that way and think about the agronomics of grasses and just trying to conduct championships and getting golf courses to championship caliber conditions in summer months in the South, you know, the strains of grass were really the challenging part, and the only reason that we didn't go further south than we were, and I think we were largely northeast. And I would say in the mid-'90s, that's when really the heat-tolerant bent grasses started to take root and thrive, and I know Pinehurst dabbled in that, and really that's what paved the way for us to retry Pinehurst #2 in 1999, and what a championship that was, with Payne Stewart winning. The golf course held up beautifully. I think Payne was 1 under, which I'd have to fact check, but he was the only player under par, winning by 1 stroke, obviously, over Phil Mickelson, and it just held up beautifully and set the stage to come back literally just 6 years later, which is a pretty, in recent run, a record return for us to come back to Pinehurst #2 in 2005, and then again in 2014 with the back-to-back championships. So as soon as we knew we could do it, it was easy to start to come back to a great place like Pinehurst, and Pinehurst Resort's been a wonderful partner in that. Bob, jump in on the grass parts too.
Yeah, I'll jump in just long enough really to give the USGA a great deal of credit, and certainly all the research institutions around the country, the collegiate or the college universities research, most of it sponsored by the USGA, is attributable to having success, and certainly good turf managers, to having the success of bent grass in the South. It was an evolution of it. The USGA greens construction methodology and the green section advisory services and the local and state universities all played a great role in helping to develop more heat-tolerant strains of bent grass. And now we've come full circle. When I first came to Pinehurst in '82, I was actually the superintendent on #2 in '85 and '86. Course #2 was treated just like Augusta National. It closed in late May and didn't open again until October, when we had everything overseeded with ryegrass. So championship golf was a struggle a lot then. because there's really no turf on the greens many times. And it was from '85 on. It's been open year-round since then, but that was the way it was managed, and it's hard to even fathom that today. But the USGA played a major role in that, and we're excited about the green section, the new golf house, Pinehurst, if you will, being home to the green section with USGA right here as well. There's been a lot of turf research going on here, from NTEP trials, best practices, all kinds of different research, but I think we'll have a great opportunity with the USGA headquarters being here now, along with the green section.
How many in the audience, Bob referenced the USGA green, and he referenced NTEP trials and the green section. How many of you guys know what a USGA green is? You guys have a sense of that? Hey, Bob, can you maybe walk them through kind of what a USGA green is, and maybe kind of how it came about a little bit, and what an NTEP trial is?
Yeah. The USGA green section, the methodology for greens construction is to have essentially a well that's 12 to 14 inches deep. The area that would be the putting surface, and 4 inches of stone in the bottom, along with drainage tile, and then putting green mix, which is a mixture of sand and soil or peat, in order for the water to drain down through the surface and into the drain pipes and out. Moisture is the biggest enemy of turf in general, especially bent grass, from a disease standpoint, and deep rooting and all kinds of other stuff that would put you to sleep. But it does enable you to manage the putting surface better. You hear about the sub-air system. You hear about that a lot at Augusta National, especially, where it actually is hooked into that system, that drainage system, and pulls water out of it to maintain a healthy turf. The NTEP trials stands for the National Turfgrass Evaluation Program. So as universities, turf breeders around the country are finding what they hope to be, prove themselves as to be good turf, profitable from a marketing standpoint, and all that. They literally put them in trials and are evaluated by third parties, usually USGA and other university research people, to grade them on quality over a period of time. So that's what the NTEP trials are.
Yeah, well, over the last year, every pharmaceutical company is trying to get a coronavirus vaccine. Every university is trying to create the next great turf grass out there. There's lots of discussions all throughout the country. People in every grill room at every country club talk about, well, this course should host a U.S. Open, and why don't they host the U.S. Open over at in Phoenix at Whisper Rock, and why don't they hold it over here, and why don't they hold it over there? People make lists of where the U.S. Open should go. I'm not sure that too many people know all of the things that maybe they don't see on TV. Most viewers tune in and they watch their favorite pro or amateur compete in the U.S. Open, and they see the golf course that's presented, but they might not see what else goes into it and think about some of the other factors. Robbie, can you walk us through kind of all of the other things that go into staging such a championship? And Pinehurst is a little bit of a one-off. Usually you're in a much larger metropolitan area. Maybe you can kind of walk us through that dichotomy a little bit.
Sure, I'll try, and anyone stop me with questions. Certainly, when you look at our future sites and how to analyze future sites for our U.S. Open or any of our championships, it really actually starts with an invitation from the golf course. So we have to be invited by Pinehurst Resort and Oakmont and Shinnecock and Pebble Beach. And once we receive that invitation, and as you might imagine, some championships receive more or maybe more sought after than others when you look at all 14 championships we run on a yearly basis. We do an evaluation, and it really does start with the golf course. The golf course really has to hold up for the level of player per the championship we're looking at, from an architectural intent and the ability to get the conditions where we'd like them to conduct that championship. And then it's got to have the logistical resources to put on a championship. And when you look at just taking the U.S. Open for that matter, it's, you know, we're named out through 2027, I believe, in our U.S. Open sites, and it's about a 10-year process when you look at, you know, what we look at and how to evaluate a host club and what's going on with that host club and that golf course and the logistics surrounding it. We need 10,000 hotel rooms. Obviously, we don't have 10,000 hotel rooms or Pinehurst or Moore County, but, you know, you draw a radius around Pinehurst and you go up to Raleigh and Greensboro and others, you can figure out that number of hotel rooms. And you look at the Pinehurst population is right about 16,000 people last I checked, and Bob can correct me, but our biggest day in attendance-wise at the 2014 U.S. Open was 56,000 people. So we brought in over 3 times the population of Pinehurst just to Pinehurst Resort Golf Course. So if you think about doing that, we've got to have the resources of a mini city all on the golf course. We've got to park people. We know the ratio of cars per attendees is 2.3. So on average at every U.S. Open, you need to park cars equivalent to 2.3 per car for your attendance. So that's about 20,000 cars. We know we can park about 125 cars in an acre of grass or fields if we're looking at parking that many cars. So we need, you know, acreage to park cars. We've got to transport them to and from those parking areas so that we don't disrupt the local area. And that's all before you get to the golf course. On the golf course, we've got to have room to build facilities to house 50,000 people. That, you know, in a U.S. Open mind, you know, we need about a bleacher seat for every third spectator. So we've got to have rooms around the greens and tees for 50,000 people to put up about 18 to 20,000 bleacher seats. We need food service and room to build concessions and tents. And at a normal U.S. Open, we have about 400,000 square feet of tent space, which is about 12 football fields. So you've got to have room for all of that. You've got to be able to move people seamlessly around the golf course. If a third of your fans are sitting in the bleachers, 2/3 are walking along the rope lines trying to watch, and all of that goes into it. So if we can put all that together and know we can successfully host the fans, and then we've got the right golf course to set it up and challenge the skill level of the player in our championship, that's when we have a pretty winning formula. I've got a few fun facts from U.S. Opens, and when we have 56,000 people, I look back and just to give you a few fun facts, and again, it was 489,000 square feet of tented space we built in addition to the clubhouse. So that's merchandise tents, that's corporate hospitality, that's concession stands, that's all of that. Speaking of concessions, we sold 75,000 over the course of a week. Isn't all that much when you talk about that, 75,000 soft drinks. We sold 50,000 bottles of water, so people weren't really hydrating, but we sold 365,000 beers. So we kind of know what the intent, it is an entertainment, and I guess when you want to be entertained, you have your frosty beverage with you, and Bob and I will attest to that right now.
And how many portalettes per?
Yeah, yeah.
Bleacher seats aren't important, it's the
Yeah,
portalettes that
yeah,
are
that's the number one question. The ratio is 1 portalette for every 50 people in attendance at a U.S. Open. So you kind of know some facts that you don't want to share. So anyway, so all of that's kind of what makes a winning formula, and when we have it all right, and again, we're fortunate to be Pinehurst Resort. It's no secret why we keep coming back. You look at, you know, the wonderful golf course we have here at number 2, and the challenge it provides. Doesn't need rough and doesn't need a lot of things. It's just naturally challenging. The architect's intent plays out on every single hole. And then you look at the other 4 golf courses surrounding number 2 and the space we have around and the open fields around, and then you extend our radius up to Raleigh, Greensboro, Rockingham, and you can house all those people and bus them. This is about as good a site as we have in the country as for a U.S. Open.
Yeah. One thing I'll add to that as well, and it speaks back somewhat to what Tom Passer was saying last night. We were talking about St. Andrews and the parallels with Pinehurst and St. Andrews and the uniqueness of, it's kind of like which came first, the village or the golf. But the fact is they're both so integrated with one another. Pinehurst in our village, in our community, volunteer people, their volunteer spirit that do what they feel good about doing, volunteering for the community, fundraising, wherever the case may be, and so they share that, and they also have a common DNA of golf I mean, it's just, they love golf and they love community service. And we've got 16,000 of them that embrace that, because it's not an easy job for the volunteer base. And I think that's a very special part of us being part of the community, just as the old course is, St. Andrews.
You know, I think that's kind of interesting. Pinehurst Resort is privately owned, and yet when you think about it in terms of its connection to the town, in many respects, it kind of resembles almost a municipal golf course feel, in that it's so connected to the town. From a operation standpoint, it kind of serves the best of both worlds. You don't have to deal with the municipality at the same level, but you kind of get that strong connection.
Well, Pinehurst wasn't even an incorporated government community or government entity until 1982. So it was a company town. The Tufts family built the cottages. They owned the water company. They owned the power company. Even when I moved here, the Pinehurst Incorporated still owned the community.
You know, when you think about all of the different things that go into staging a championship that Robbie talked about, it's easy to see why they book them 10 years out. You got a lot of stuff to plan for. That holds true with the golf course as well. Bob, maybe you can walk us through when you're set to host a championship. When does that preparation start? When do you start having conversations with the USGA, if there's an architect involved? And maybe walk us through the process of a year in advance, 2 months in advance, the week before, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I think at the level that we've been fortunate to have enough championships in intervening years between our U.S. Open championships, it's just a continuous dialogue of how the golf course is doing, what we're doing with it. The only significant changes that we made, even in '99 for the championships, we resurfaced the greens, which was not it was a big deal, but nothing architecturally involved in it. We added tees in '99, back tees, and we backed up some more tees in '05. So that was all ongoing dialogue, and you want to have the course present itself essentially 52 weeks the week of the U.S. Open the year before. We evaluate it very strongly, and we still do today. Every week of the U.S. Open, we want to know what number 2 is going to be like that week for the next year or what have you. But I thought the interesting thing, if you look at the way number 2 changed from '99 to '05, as Robbie said, that was the shortest return to a championship site in modern times. And you look at the difference in the golf course from '99 to '05, the fairways got much narrower, and we had deeper rough, and we moved tees back. And then we try to leave some of that in place. But the changes that we made in 2010 with Core and Crenshaw were significant. But the cool thing about those changes, it affected every player that plays every week of the year, because it stays the same week to week to week and year to year. Our members and mortals that play where they should be playing on white tees, the changes that we made in '99 and '05 didn't affect them, other than fairways were narrow and all that. But when we made the changes with Core and Crenshaw, it affected everyone that plays, from the red tees all the way back, every day. And that's the way you'll play it tomorrow, from the proper set of tees, hopefully, that you can enjoy it and be challenged at similar levels that the amateurs were last year.
So when you get to, you monitor it a year in advance, and you're looking at it, and you're taking your readings and getting a sense for where things are a year out. Then when you're a couple months out, or when you're getting closer, does the USGA team, is there one person at the USGA that you work most closely with, and what kind of discussions will you have when you go around the golf course? What are the things that you're testing? What are the things you're talking about?
The things we start focusing on a great deal, certainly the fall before the championships, we'll start really stressing on management of the green surrounds to make sure we don't have any winter injury. We have covers for some areas around the greens to protect them if we would have a really cold winter, things like that. And then as things start really happening on the build sites in January and February, then it really kicks into another gear. But from the golf course inside the ropes perspective, we just monitor the way things are greening up and really start obsessing with surface conditioning levels of the putting surfaces and the green surrounds and the fairways as it's greening up. And it's a conversation. There's not any specific time frame where you need to make a call in every week or anything like that. We just have ongoing dialogue, whether it's good or bad or what have you, just to see how things are moving along.
One of the real highlights of my career was the opportunity to work with Robbie and some of his colleagues at the USGA and the golf course staff in the setup of the U.S. Amateur and the U.S. Open out at Chambers Bay. And one of the neat things that I got to see and somewhat be a part of was the discussion about the hole locations and where hole locations would go on each green and which ones would work and how you sometimes marry the hole location to a tee location. Maybe, Robbie, can you kind of walk us through kind of how many hole locations you're typically looking for on a green and the types of discussions that you might have around that?
Sure, I can jump in, and I know Bob will weigh in some too, but that's an interesting part of that. And again, part of looking at any golf course, whether it's Pinehurst No. 2 or Chambers Bay or any of our championship courses, Country Club of North Carolina down the road's having our U.S. Junior Amateur Championship next year. We really got our whole intent is try to figure out the architect's intent for each golf hole and how it'll play, and for the skill level of player we're going to have, how that hole should play, and that could, if we're talking about U.S. Open players or U.S. Amateur players that truly hit it the longest of the long, a new tee box might need to be added to a couple holes to keep the architect's intent or a key feature of an architectural part of a golf hole there. And then to Jay's point, you're looking at anywhere from a 7 to 9 day competition when you include practice rounds for U.S. Open or U.S. Amateur or any of our championships. You've got to have 9 hole locations that can stand out and in some ways hopefully provide a little variety if that's the architect's intent of a given hole, or if we want to introduce variety because we're looking at a match play championship versus strictly stroke play. Our U.S. Open stroke play all 4 days. Our U.S. Amateurs match play for the bulk of the championship. Once you get through 2 rounds of stroke play, you play 6 rounds of match play if you want to win the U.S. Amateur. So when you get to match play, you can introduce a little variety, and that's where truly you can, the risk-reward elements can come in, and you can really challenge the players' thinking. And as long as they make the right decision and then execute based on that decision, they're rewarded for a shot. So when that happens, that's when the golf course setup really goes in the best, and it becomes a lot of fun to watch that play out. So Bob, I'll let you weigh into that, but that's some of the fun we have.
Yeah, it's fun. The interesting thing I learned, especially from 99 through 14. In 99, the stimp meter was all you did was measure green speed. By the time we got to 05, they were, in fact, our 2005 championship was the first one they measured greens firmness on every green. So you're building these metrics to help support a hole location. It might be teetering on the edge of, is this a good hole or a bad hole? You start looking at the metrics of the speed, which is obviously what it is, but the firmness, and then by the time we had the championships in 14, we were measuring the moisture levels, and we use smart levels to measure the percentage of slope, and you put those metrics in place with the moisture, the firmness, and the speed, and you can come up with you were genius in 14. I'm still amazed. We worked really hard, the championship committee did, of making sure the course tested the women players on week 2 at the same level and skill sets as the men's. That was our primary goal. They're playing the same golf course per se. They want to hit the same relative number of irons into greens. So they were working on yardages and firmness of the greens. But in the final round, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the scoring average, there was 0.3 of a stroke difference in the scoring average in the final rounds of the men's versus and the women's. That's how close we were able to use the metrics to give you a confidence in a hole location. And I think that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, for those of you, think about any green on your home golf course, right? And go walk around it and try to find 9 interesting places to put a pin. And then if you're able to do that on all 18 of your greens, that's a challenge in itself. Then try to look at the set of 18 greens and make sure that you've got some semblance of variety. You can't put on Thursday, it's probably not a good idea to have all 18 of the greens to be on the left-hand side of a green. And so, it's quite a process to try and map out where the hole locations can go over the course of a week, because not only do you have to find interesting hole locations that will work well with the strategy, but you're trying to manage traffic as well. So the ability to pull off back-to-back opens, I think it's one thing to tune in on TV and say, oh, that's kind of cool. They're playing the same course 2 weeks in a row. The logistics behind it all had to be one of the great achievements in all of championship golf. So
we were blessed with great weather. The weather is always the factor. Even hole location, you have to worry about a low one and a high one. We went for 2 weeks without really had one rain event over a 2-week period. It could have been a disaster.
We had the luck.
Well, that gets us to championship week. And so, Bob, maybe you can walk us through a little bit what your typical staff size is for an 18-hole golf course, and what it becomes during championship week. And then maybe you can walk us through what your day is like. Okay. When are you arriving? When are you departing? What's sleep like on championship?
The only thing dependable about the day is, it's a long one, right? You don't ever know from 1 hour to the next what's going to happen. But typically, course number 2, for example, we might have 25, 30 people normally, some part-time and all that, but that's our crew size, along with mechanics, service staff, and those kind of things. But during the championship, we'll have upwards of 100 people, and probably twice as much equipment as we normally do.
And those are other superintendents from all over the country that come to help out.
We're unique in that sense that, and that is a great thing that our brotherhood does. We travel and volunteer at one another's courses for championships and things like that. But for the 14 championship, we chose not to do that. We made sure people were welcome to come and come down to our area and visit and what have you. But we realized we were going to be doing this for 2 weeks, right? No one in their right mind is going to come volunteer for 2 weeks. And we wanted to, most importantly, involve all of our other crew around the golf courses. We have over 250 golf course employees, and we didn't want them to feel left out. We wanted them to have the opportunity to be part of the championship, and they also had their golf courses to present each day for the golf that we had going on otherwise. So we had plenty of people. We had some volunteers, local superintendents that come to volunteer, but we would report, usually crew reports at 4 a.m., 4:30 we're loaded up, and everything's under lights basically with lighted equipment, and you have your morning jobs complete off the course. We have response teams on the course during play to respond to wherever the case may need be, and we have crew level standby for weather events in case obviously the worst case would happen. And then we do the same thing that evening, essentially, and we do that for about 10 days leading into, several days leading into the championship. But it's a great deal of fun. We have opportunities to rest and have fun. The guys, it's a big time. It's a great part of our career.
During the middle of the day, will you try and go home and catch a nap, or nap in the office, or how do you do that?
I've been known to go to sleep in the office occasionally, or go home and take a nap. I got to tell you a funny story though. The way storms happen in 2014. We had a terrible storm after round one that really people hardly even knew we had, because it was right on the course. And I live less than 2 miles away. And I'm coming in the next morning, like at 4:30, and the crew's already there and I try to stay out of their way that early in the morning. And I hear on the radio people needing pumps, and I need 6 people here, I need 3 blowers, I need all this stuff on the radio. I'm thinking, what happened? It didn't even rain in my house. And we had close to 3 inches of rain here that washed the entire golf course away. And these guys were able to put it back together, and we didn't even have a delayed start. It was remarkable accomplishment. But you just have to be ready for those kinds of things.
I'll never forget, I was at the 95 U.S. Open at Oakland Hills, and there was some major weather. They've got some very deep fairway bunkers, 6-8 feet deep in fairway bunkers, and I remember those being completely full with water when I was leaving, I don't know, on a Tuesday evening. And you come out Wednesday morning, and the golf course is pristine and ready to play.
There was horrific lightning, snow, and thunder. Oh, my goodness.
Robbie, what's championship week like for you? What's your schedule like? What are some of the tasks that you're taking on during that week?
Sure. Well, as we've talked about earlier, obviously we have to kind of build the city before the fans and players get here, and hopefully all that's gone well for pre-championship build-up. And once we get to championship week, our world really starts to revolve around the players, and when they have their timelines, that's when we start to work on either the player side of things or the fan side of things. Our first tee time generally is about 6:45 a.m. Monday through Friday, and then a little later once we make the cut. So at 6:45 first tee time, we're on site about 4 a.m. to make sure we beat the players here, that breakfast is already ready, that locker rooms are swept and clean, security's set up. 1 hour before that first tee time is when we open our admission gates for fans. So we've got parking lots already in motion, about 5:30 for a 5:45 admission gate open. And at that point, we're really just starting to welcome players and fans and troubleshoot as much as we have any sort of issues. And past that, it's really kind of revolving around making sure, the plans you have in place are in motion. It's a constant, 18 to 20 hour day, championship week, making sure that everything's running smoothly, that we have about 2,000 volunteers on a day that, as Bob mentioned, we've got a wonderful support community here for golf, but to have 5,000 volunteers work at a U.S. Open, we have to have volunteers come in from all over, and they've got to be in place, and those are marshals and spotters and scoring and the telecommunications and internet services that set up to do all that. We're constantly monitoring that, troubleshooting that, welcoming players, making sure food's ready, all of those things. Waters are on the tee boxes, and if it's all going well, it's a nice, quiet day, but it rarely all goes well. But luckily for us, it's gone so well, or when we are troubleshooting, it's just us that know about it. The players are oblivious. Fans, either in person or on television, don't know what we're doing behind the scenes to make it look seamless, and that's always our goal. So it's an interesting day, but and it's never anything, no 2 days are quite the same when it comes to that. But it's a lot of fun trying to do it that way.
One thing people wouldn't realize, and Robbie could probably tell you how many people, but for what you would see that goes on at night from 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. until 4 a.m. of servicing all the concession areas, the restrooms, that's where it really gives me nightmares too, from a grounds perspective. You've got all these big, massive trucks out there running around all night long, and you certainly can't stay up and watch them. There's no point in that, but it's remarkable.
We have over 100 delivery trucks come on site every night, or service trucks, whether it's delivering,
fuel.
Yeah, fuel, or I mentioned 365,000 beers that we serve. We've got to keep bringing those in regularly, but we've got to pump the portalets. We've got to fuel the generators that are powering all the temporary tents. All of that happens from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., so we have a second shift come on. We do have 24/7 security for months leading up to it, but certainly championship week. So all that's in place, and we have a team that really does start to monitor that. And Bob's right. You'll see semi-trucks driving down cart paths, and one wrong turn, and we've got some troubles. So it's always a concern, but it's amazing what transpires by the time we sundown and close up shop and the last player leaves. Between that and 4 a.m. when the first player starts to pull up and start to eat breakfast, a lot's happened overnight to get it ready on a daily basis.
We always hear stories about the U.S. Open's coming up and Tiger has arrived 3 weeks early to check out the golf course and get in his quick practice round. Sounds interesting to us. What goes into that on the host course side? Does that get funneled through your team, Robbie? How does that work?
Yeah, I can start. And obviously, we work with each host club to kind of handle it differently, and the privacy issue is probably the paramount part when a Tiger or, at this point, Justin Thomas or any of those guys call and want to do a quick jet in, jet out, and luckily they can afford the private airfare related to that it is literally a quick trip, and we try to facilitate that. Every player has an equal opportunity, or else we don't allow it. So if Tiger's going to come play a practice round a month out, that means any of the 156 players could do the same, and we would facilitate each one of those players to the best of our ability. So we would work with each host club to, hopefully get them in pretty quietly so it doesn't create a little bit of a circus in and around his visit. And a lot of those guys are in. They're first off at even 6:30 or 7 a.m. before the first play goes, and they're out of here by noon. But we had that happen a few times at Wingfoot going into this last U.S. Open. And it always provides a little interesting dynamic a month out and a little challenge for us to just do it quietly and, in support of the player. But we try to do that for anyone.
Do they give you advance warning, or do they call you on Tuesday and say, I want to play on Thursday?
Not as much advance warning as we would like for that very reason. They want to be have as much privacy about it as they can. So
here at Pinehurst, do you close the golf course in advance of an Open Championship? And if so, how far in advance will you actually close the course to play?
We'll manage play on it going into it, but the advance week or the last week it's open, or before the championship, we've done it different ways. We didn't have it completely closed this past championship, I don't think. I don't remember.
Yeah, in 14s we closed it 1 week before the men,
1 week
which
before,
was 2 weeks.
right?
But
yeah.
the men and women came in to
They
practice.
were able to practice. That's what,
yeah.
yeah, exactly, on advance week.
So just 1 week in advance. And how typical is that, Robbie? How much variance is there from club to club?
It varies a little, and one of the beauties about, each course is a little different, and when you're trying to manage rough heights and things like that, we don't have to worry about that at Pinehurst. So as long as the course conditions are holding up well going into it and we're managing it well, we certainly want, whether it's a private club or a resort community, we don't want to take away the club or golf course for any longer than we really have to make sure it's in pristine condition. So it varies from course to course, but we would try to let play happen as long as possible, just out of respect for the golf fans who want to try to have their hand in it right beforehand.
So you spend years planning for this event. You get to championship week. Hopefully everything goes swimmingly. You try to catch up on your sleep after championship week. What kind of post-mortem do you do? What kind of meetings do you have after the fact? If you're going to return to a venue, you've come up with your outside the ropes plan of where the concessions go, where everything goes. Now the event happens. I'm assuming there's a big study that says this worked well, this didn't, and then hopefully if you come back, you adjust a little bit. Can you walk through how you guys adjust from championship to championship?
Certainly, I guess on the USGA side of things, there's lessons learned with everything we're doing, and certainly, hopefully, it's been an interesting year to ask that question, because in a COVID world where we had to cancel 10 of our championships, I was lucky enough to be kind of front and center working on our U.S. Amateur and U.S. Open. Our U.S. Amateur was at Bandon Dunes and U.S. Open, and we literally had to throw every lesson learned from our 20 years experience and start from scratch. And that, your question's interesting, because when you have 20 years of experience, so a lot of things become second nature, and you just kind of learn and adapt, and you tweak little things. And this year we had to literally start from scratch, and it just proved to be really interesting in doing that. And there was a lot of postmortems, even from our U.S. Amateur at Bandon Dunes, to take to Wing Foot a month later, and we're learning from a U.S. Amateur and applying it to a U.S. Open in this type of environment. But in any given year, we always learn something a little bit, whether we're returning to that site or we're just carrying it forward as a best practice improved. We're always about improvement and learning. So it's an interesting time to ask that question, but we're always trying to better ourselves that way.
Bob, how about from your side of things? What are the types of things that you remember from one championship and adjusted to the next? Whether it's just working with the team or it could be some agronomic issue.
From an agronomic perspective, I think we stay pretty well on the front of that with our normal conversations and relationships with the agronomy experts at the USGA. But I'm always interested in seeing the USGA reports and what some of their dialogue has been and some of their records that have been, the amount of fencing and all those type things that just kind of go at one championship to the next and get tweaked. So they're always full of information for all that I'm always fascinated to see where they're tracking with things.
It's probably safe to say that you and or your colleagues know more about the golf course than anybody. How many of the players actually seek you out and ask questions of you about the golf course?
Oh, very few. We might have a conversation while we're out there. They may walk over and just chat, but they're pretty dialed in, and they know what they're looking for, and they know how things are going to respond and happen. So they're not really looking for any inside information that I might have or any of my team. But it's always nice to have them out there playing and watching the practice rounds. One of the good things we have is our North-South Championships every year with really high-level amateur players, and we can judge that and watch that every year of what changes in the firmness of the fairways and all these type things to see where they're hitting it and hole locations and various things like that. So this 24th, our upcoming championship will be the first one we've played on ultra dwarf greens. In fact, it'll be the first U.S. Open has been played on them, if I would assume, and so it'll be a little different animal. But we had the last year's amateur championship as a proving ground for that, so it's been really good.
Yeah, I'll give you a small interesting story about a player who happened to win this trophy, but I think Bob's right. A lot of these players, the U.S. Amateur all the way up to the U.S. Open, really don't, they know their games well enough that they can plan out and around. It's funny, in match play, it's a little known fact that if you win a match or lose a match, you can continue out and play out. You can get up early, you can walk the golf course, and unless we institute a local rule, you can even practice on the golf course. So there was one player in particular that won this trophy that came out every morning early and didn't necessarily ask, but always kind of got the whole location sheet early, did a little walk around. When he won his match, he would play in and he would delay us in the media center as we were trying to get into this, and he'd want to hit a few tee shots he'd close out his match on 14, and that 16th hole was posing in problems to you. So he'd walk over to 16, and he's the only player I've ever seen do this at length throughout championship week. Anyone want to guess? Bryson DeChambeau. He won the U.S. Amateur in 2015. So I can tell you whether he is committed to what he believes in, and it was interesting to see how dedicated he was and how he used the rules to his advantage, and he did it so smartly. He won the U.S. Amateur going away that year.
There's a lot of them that not only would they not use them, many of them don't even know realize that.
Well, that kind of leads us to the most recent news. We were so fortunate to have our Architecture Summit planned to be here at Pinehurst, planned months out, and then just a month or two ago, we get the big news that the connection between the USGA and Pinehurst, which has been strong for decades, is going to get even stronger. Maybe, Robbie, can you walk us through what that means in detail and how all that came about?
I can share a little bit, certainly what I know. And
we want all of the stuff that never gets printed.
Yeah, well, obviously you mentioned it, and we've talked about it several times. It starts with such a great relationship between the USGA and Pinehurst Resort. And if we didn't have this great relationship, it never would have come forth. And you know, when we want to host championships, and a term that's been circulated more recently around the USGA is an anchor site. If we were really looking to build a couple of cornerstones of where we wanted to take our core championships, U.S. Open for sure, but not even just U.S. Open, the U.S. Amateur, the Women's Open, where is a place or two or three around the country that we could really build a foundation? And Pinehurst was at the top of the list, and certainly is the one that came about. It came with a great dialogue between us and Pinehurst, and they were equally, I think, excited about working with us on this. I will give mad props, and you mentioned earlier, to the local community, just with the village of Pinehurst, Moore County, all the way up to the state government, saw the benefit of 5 U.S. Opens over the next 27 years or so coming to this, and the economic impact it brings. They were ultra supportive of our championships all around, but certainly about this kind of venture between us. So we're committed to having a bigger footprint here. A little known fact, but we already have about 15 employees, myself included, that live in Pinehurst full-time. We travel a lot, but we're so rooted already with our championships coming that we've got 15 people full-time here. We have the U.S. Junior next year, the Women's Open in 22 is over at Pine Needles, the 24 U.S. Open. We had the U.S. Amateur here last year, 2019. It just keeps coming, and it's only going to get bigger and better. So we're going to have 50 people. We're going to build a brand new office center, and we're going to have a little display. It's the term museums come up. It's certainly, we're going to proudly display some artifacts, both associated with our Pinehurst USGA history, and more so some artifacts that are in our museum up in New Jersey that maybe don't get seen as much. Bring down and kind of have a little display within our I call it a mini museum here, and a visitor center, and office space for about 50 with our a new test center here with all our testing equipment. So it's really exciting to really kind of bring full circle what started about 20 years ago in 1999 with one U.S. Open as really a trial. Could we do it? And you know, not only have we done it, it's really become the cornerstone of what the USGA is going to try to be going forward.
Very, very exciting news. Maybe we've just got a couple minutes left. If anybody in the audience has a question for either Bob or Robbie, maybe we can take a couple of questions.
Well, that's a great question. I love to talk about our native areas because they're just like your garden. It's seasonal, right? Your tomato plants and whatever you're growing in your garden in July and August and part of September is green and growing. After that, you pull them out and you move on. The only plants that we planted that are native is wiregrass in the native areas. But you could play those native areas during the U.S. Open Championship week, and all those plants. So you go from that week, and then you fast forward to the amateur. And there's a lot more density in those areas during the amateur week in August than there would have been in June. And that's one of the things that we monitor that week, at third week in June every year, to see what plants are growing. And they're only a weed when you no longer want them. So that means if there's too many of them, you don't want them. If they're too big, you don't want them. So you just remove them. That's technically the only thing a weed is. But we like the density of it, some places, places we don't. Landing zones, just depends on what side of the hole it may be on or how far off the tee. A lot of different factors, and it's an art. I don't take credit for it, but you do learn how to evaluate and see, okay, that's going to be too much. And then from our members' perspective in regular resort play, the fairways are twice as wide as they were in '05 for the Open Championship. So your ball stays in turf more, and if it does get into the native areas, like Tom said last night, there's a good chance it's going to be sitting on hard pan without any plants around it, unless it's in the middle of August, and it may be different. Well, I think, yeah. There's a lot of concern going into the championships that the women maybe should play first There's a lot of reasons why we couldn't have that, but from the divot perspective, all the concerns that were raised, none of them turned out to be an issue. But from a divot perspective, as I said earlier, if we wanted the ladies hitting an 8-iron, if the men were hitting an 8-iron into the green, we wanted the ladies to be hitting 8-iron. So those divot fields are in different places. Now, there was some divots, but not any. I don't know it was an issue. We found ourselves, this is a true story, I patted myself on the back thinking, okay, we did okay. In round 3 of the ladies, in our afternoon agronomy meeting with the committee, the first thing on the agenda, and really the only thing to talk about, was the cart. We had some comments that around some of the cart path areas was dusty. But literally, it came up. I'm like, well, I think we're doing okay. That's a true story.
Dusty. I hadn't heard that one.
It was dry and dusty.
Too dusty. I would just say on the USGA side, it couldn't have gone any better. I think our whole organization was so proud of being able to stage that back-to-back. We've tried to do it either simultaneously or back-to-back with some other championships. We had the U.S. Junior and Girls Junior together a couple of times, actually, back when we had the APL and Women's APL. We've done it before. So anytime we can have both genders in golf play together, it's an amazing opportunity to showcase the talent at both sides, and we would try it. On the open and women's open side, there's not but a few places that could really do it. If you talk about, rough links and some other factors that might play into the challenge and the difference between spin rate of golf shots, and that we knew a lot about a lot of that and how to set it up. And Bob's spot on. We wanted, the same playing conditions to exist based on the skill level, and it's not skill level so much as how the trajectory of a shot of the average women golfer compared to men's a little different, and the spin rate of coming off a 9-iron is a little different. So we looked at all that type of thing to make sure the firmness and hole locations matched, but all that worked so well that we were so happy with it. And I think we would love to try it again. We also, as Bob mentioned earlier, we got so lucky with weather and some other things that it could have just sidetracked competitions if we were delayed at the men's open and had to postpone a day. Or back then we actually had a 18-hole playoff on Monday that could have derailed a practice round, and luckily Martin Keimer won by about 25, it felt like anyway. He played so well that we didn't have to worry about that. So some of the things that were concerns out of our control luckily went the way we needed them to, but it was such a success. We were really proud of that.
Well, to answer the first question, there's not enough land to stretch number 2 like that, or any golf. I don't see that happening on number 2, or maybe a handful of courses that would ever even have the resources or desire to do that. And I'm not commenting on the ball at all, I promise you. But if you look at the way course number 2 is held up since '99, there was a significant difference between '99 and '05 with the golf balls, but with the spin rate of the golf ball, balata, all those things from '99 to '05 was a big difference. There's a big difference since then, but we're also, if we try to look back in the rearview mirror of what golf was 40 years ago, 30 years ago, the conditioning levels, I don't think from an agronomy standpoint we don't get nearly as much credit or discussion about how much better the conditioning levels are now versus 30 years ago or 20 years ago. The putting surfaces, the fairways, and the courses the professionals play week to week to week are in exceptional condition. So there's a factor too, but I don't think we want to roll that back because of the scoring level. So I think this is something, to a certain extent, you accept as a fair competition. I'm not advocating one or the other, but I'm just saying that's some of the things you just have to accept as the way the game's evolved. Technology's evolved, and physical attributes of the players. There's so many factors in it, I think.
Well, with that, we just want to say thank you to everybody for coming and participating in these sessions. But most of all, thank you to Robbie for taking time out and joining us, and all that you and the USGA do. And Bob, thank you to you and your entire team here at Pinehurst. We've had a great visit so far. We're looking forward to number 2 tomorrow. And really, I think to the superintendents in general, those are you and your colleagues throughout the entire nation are kind of the unsung heroes of the business. As golfers, we all get to travel and show up and enjoy all these great golf courses, but it's you and your team and the superintendents around the country that really make it all work for everybody else. So on behalf of all the Raiders and everybody here, thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
cheers.
Jay. And thank you all for being here. Enjoy your day tomorrow. I hope you have fun.